Let's take a closer look at 3ds Max's Curve Editor. The Curve Editor is going to be your most important tool for truly polishing animation. We have a lot of control with it. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Curve Editor, and by the end of this lesson we will truly have our aircraft cycle, and we'll make sure that it blends properly as it does. Because right now you can see that the cycle, quote unquote, is pretty rough. So we have a few things to clean up here, and we're going to get something really nice by the end of this. Alright, so let's say we get started here. We can go ahead and select our animation control, right click, and access the Curve Editor from our quad menu. Another way to access it is from the Graph Editors menu, and you'll find it right at the top. Now we've taken a look at a few settings already within this editor, like auto expand. We've also taken a look at how we can use our key stats, how we can delete keys. Right, so I'd like to show you a few other options we have. For one, our interpolation types. Let's go ahead and take a look at the position Z track. This is our up and down axis. So as of right now, you can see the animation slowly moves up, holds for a little bit, and then moves down. Now, with our keys selected, take a look here. We have different ways we can adjust our tangency. So right now, I've just set the tangents to slow, which gives us the same result. We have a slow out of the initial key, a slow in to the next key, a slow out, and then a slow in. Now, if we were to go ahead and use the option to the left of that, set to fast, you can see we get some really sharp results. Let's go ahead and take a look at the animation. We'll play it back. You should notice that our up and down is much harsher now. What we could do is blend this. We could take the top key and set this to slow, and now what we've ended up with is something that you'd see in a bouncing ball, where there is a fast hit, and then we have more of a hold, and then we come back to a fast contact key. So when we play this back, we'll see that our aircraft resembles more of a bouncing ball. Though it's pretty slow. You get the idea. If we go back to the Curve Editor, you can see that we have a few more tangent types. They're stepped, and this is very useful when blocking in animation. If you'd like to learn more about this, again, feel free to take a look at animation polishing techniques. You can also take a look at Introduction to Animation in 3ds Max. But this is a way of just blocking in animation. So you can see our up and down is going to be very blocky now, because we have this constant value until we get to another value change. And then we can also set our keyframes to linear for a constant speed. We'll take a look at that when we get into path animation in the following lesson. Then we also have another smoothing option. You'll see that when we use these custom settings, or excuse me, these presets for our tangents, we don't have access to any tangent handles. That's why when you're working, typically you're going to work with set tangents to auto or set to spline. You can see with spline, now we have access to edit tangent handles, and this is great because we can start to modify the animation without having to add any extra keyframes to clutter up our function curves. I tend to stick with auto because by default it's going to go ahead and flatten out each of your tangents, and then it makes it easier, in my opinion, to just go in and modify each keyframe. So what we're going to go ahead and do is keep our keyframe set to auto, but let's go ahead and just drag out our tangent handle a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it out using the start and end handles, so we can have more of a hold in our ship for weight. Alright, so what we'll want is the ship to come up, to hold for a bit, and then it should then start to fall. So that's what we have now. When we play the animation back, you can see that the ship is going to hold in the air for a bit before it falls. Alright, great. So if we were to go back to our F-curves, if you wanted, you can right click on your keyframe to get some information from it. And this is really helpful because now we can start to see what type of settings we're using for each keyframe. So notice instantly I've switched the tangent type. I'll go ahead and press Control Z to undo that change. This is really nice. Now, how come we don't see more information in our time and value settings? Well, that's simply because we have more than one key selected. If I were to go ahead and select just one key, now we have a lot of information. If we were to go ahead and take a look at advanced, take a look. We not only see our time and value settings, all right, that's from the simple editor, but over here what we see are settings for our tangents. So if we wanted 1/2 to match the other side, it's just a matter of taking one value, let's say this value of 0.562. I'll just go ahead and set that to 0.5 just for the sake of you following along with me. We just use the same value here. So we could go ahead and set the other side to 0.5, and there you go. We have now adjusted the length. If we want to adjust the orientation, we can use the other sliders here. And if you'd ever like to break the orientation of 1/2, you could go ahead and uncheck the lock right next to the end parameter. So now we're able to adjust just 1/2. Why would we want to do this? Well, this is going to create a break for weight as well. If we had an object that needed to contact the surface, we could go ahead and break a keyframe, and what will happen is as that object reaches the surface, it's going to hit hard, and then we can make sure that the other half causes the object to bounce back. So those are some helpful tools. Again, we cover this more in depth in Intro to Animation in 3ds Max. So I'm going to make sure that these are locked again, just so we can keep this orientation of our tangent flattened out. I'll go ahead and make sure that our end value is set to 0. You can see that that's going to shift things on the opposite end. No worries, if we unlock and set the value to 0 here, and then lock again, it's no longer a problem. Alright, wonderful. So those are some ways we can edit our keyframes from their tangents. Again, very helpful. You don't want to clutter up your F-curve any more than it needs to be, so you could always work with tangents to get the look you would like. If you'd like to slide a keyframe around, it's just a matter of holding that keyframe and dragging it around with the left mouse button. If we were to hold down Control and drag, notice we can lock our movement either horizontally in time, or if we hold down Control and drag up and down, we can lock our keyframe's movement vertically in value. Alright, so you can see how that's going to kind of change things. We're going to get the airship going to its highest point later, but then it will fall faster. Alright, so what I'll do is make sure that this is back on frame 40. We can do that by using our frame field at the top. We'll just go ahead and type in 40 to center this keyframe. Alright, so we know how to move keys around. If you'd like to clone keys, you can simply hold down Shift and drag away, and now we've instantly created a keyframe. I really enjoy the keyframing tools in Max because we can work faster using them. It's just really intuitive. If we want to remove this keyframe, just simply highlight it and use the delete key to do that. Right now I'm in the frame field, so I might just go ahead and move the editor, go ahead and select that keyframe, and then delete it that way. Alright, great. So now what we could do is take a look at our rotate axis that causes the ship to tilt. And that's going to be the x-axis. So you can see here that we don't quite have a smooth F-curve. We would need the start of our animation in the x-axis to resemble the end in order for us to achieve a seamless cycle. Alright, so in order to do that, a helpful way is to first make sure that the animation cycles, and then what we could do is start to tweak our tangents in a way where we get this type of blend in and out of the animation. So this is going to be really cool. Let's go ahead and focus in on our x-axis. We'll also go in and control click our position track that we have animated so we could cycle that as well. That's going to be the position Z. So with both of these selected, to cycle the animation, we'd head over to Edit, from there Controller, and now we could choose out of range types. Previously in Max, you might have found the controller menu already at the top, but now it's been nested inside of the Edit menu. So we're just going to choose out of range types, and now we can go in and we can set the animation to cycle. So now when we choose OK, take a look, our F-curves will continue to cycle indefinitely. So now we could focus in on our x-axis. We can start to adjust things. Let's go ahead and select our start key here, and we'll go ahead and lift up our tangent so it blends into the end key, the infinite end key here. If we go to the end and start to adjust our tangent, now we can bring that down so it blends into the infinite start time. And we don't even need this keyframe in the middle. It's just going to slow things down a bit. So we could smooth this out by deleting that keyframe in the center and take a look at what we have done in no time at all. When we play back the animation, now we have a seamless idle. Very nice, and it does cycle indefinitely. To prove this, let's go ahead and add some time. Remember how to do that? We hold down Control Alt and we drag with the right mouse button, so we can always add, let's say, just a few more frames. I'll go ahead and set this to about 130. So we've just added about 50 frames or so. When we play back the animation, notice that the animation will continue to idle. Great. If you want it to blend in the next range, it's just a matter of adding a few more keyframes at the end time. We could always slide this over to about 160, simply 80 times 2, our last frame times 2, and now we should notice a nice seamless blend after we leave 60 and move to frame 0. Very nice. Alright, so what we've done in this lesson is learn how to infinitely loop animation in 3ds Max. We've also taken a look at some very helpful tools for tweaking, polishing animation without having to clutter up our F-curves.